It's not often that an iconic birding venue is taken over by new owners.
Alex has every single bird book you can imagine.
It's even less common that those new owners have an exciting and invigorating vision that benefits the birders who use these places.
So it's pretty phenomenal. It's a pretty phenomenal place.
We also look at the plight facing the African grass owl.
And then the prey base is heavily dependent on healthy, thick grasses.
And discuss the very thorny topic of how we can ethically bird to help conserve the species we so dearly love to twitch.
The problem with our grasslands is rather overwhelming. Welcome to Zaagkuilsdrift Lodge. We've been here since yesterday afternoon, and I can't tell you how wonderful it has been to be here and see the changes that have been made. We'll introduce you to the owners later in the episode, but now we're over to Doug.
Yes, I mean, it's been an absolutely phenomenal experience, but on to news, which we normally open our show with. Now, some of you may have seen my little YouTube short where I mentioned this new book that has been recently published. It's The Birds of Greater Southern Africa. It's Keith Barnes, Terry Stevenson and Jonathan Fanshawe. Now, obviously we all have field guides. Why do we need more? I mean, ultimately the field guides change all the time, and we'll get to some of the name changes that are coming up. They're always name changes, but you don't just buy field guides because of name changes. You know, new ID theories come out, new ways of identifying birds. What makes this book particularly interesting is that, what does Greater Southern Africa mean? So our Southern African field guides cover South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique south of the Kunene River. Northern Mozambique is excluded. So this book covers northern Mozambique, but it also goes into Zambia and Malawi. And what that gives you an insight to is some of the birds that don't quite reach into Southern Africa that may come into our region as rare vagrants. And obviously that gives you the opportunity, if you see something that's not from our region, this might be a good place to first go and have a look. But of course, you know, my knowledge I've amassed over the years, the likes of some of the great birders like, you know, Trevor Hardacker. I mean, you do not get to good birding knowledge without an extensive library. So to be honest, you can never own enough books. But the interesting thing, and I mentioned in my video, is that we're actually giving this away as a prize today on this episode. And there's actually a number of people that have come to watch our recording today. They're fortunate enough to be able to enter their names into the draw. And at the end of the show, we are going to give away a copy of this book to one of the people that have come to watch us today.
Now, we talk about name changes. I mean, there's been quite a few recent ones. I think a few weeks ago there was one, and now all of a sudden we're sitting with 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. When I started putting the script together for this episode about a month ago, there was one name change that we were going to announce in the news, but it's now grown to 4. You know, I suppose first let's just clarify why all these names are changing, and they happen all the time. So first off, there is the scientific reasons. They look at birds both from a genetic perspective and from a morphology perspective. So how do they behave? How do they breed? How do they call? Plumage differences. So the IOC, and no, that's not the International Olympic Committee, that's an ornithological body. So they run a website called World Bird Names, and they've got a huge panel of highly respected ornithologists. From a Southern African perspective, Peter Ryan represents our interests on that committee. And they look at all the papers and thinking all the time, and they're constantly re-evaluating, should things be split, lumped, even if it's not a split or a lump, should it just move into another family? Is this bird no longer an albatross? Is it something else, whatever the case is? So they look at this all the time, and then this results in either English name changes, scientific name changes, splits, lumps, and so on. So what is happening right now in terms of this episode? What are we looking at for name changes? So the wandering albatross, as we have it in southern Africa, is becoming the snowy albatross.
I get that. I mean, really, the wandering albatross is more species complex. It's not really defining a particular bird. I mean, it used to consist of 4 different birds. I mean, there was the Tristan and there's also the Amsterdam. And there are differences, and you can't leave one of them as the wandering. It's really more a species complex. So we have to give it a new name. So the wandering has obviously now become the snowy. So it's more species complex than anything else.
And there's a couple of occasions where they change names to just avoid confusion, because, you know, for someone with a, if you want to call it an old school thought, they haven't followed the name changes. Wandering albatross to them may mean that complex.
Yes.
So, you know, quite often what they're doing more of now is when you split other species out, the original one that was the basket name for the whole lot, let's actually give it a new identifiable name. So that's the reason for the snowy albatross.
Well, it makes a lot of sense if you think of it in that regard. The one I'm battling with is the bronzy sunbird. Now it's going to become the bronze. I mean, bronzy sort of applies that it's sort of bronzy, sort of bronze, whereby bronze is it's bronze. So,
and that's one of the ones where sometimes they change names just to avoid confusion in other areas of the world where maybe English might not be a first language. They talk about sort of vernacular confusion. So I think that's the reason for the bronzy sunbird going back to bronze. Then we've got what I find the funniest flip-flop of the year, and maybe the IOC can get an award from us at the end of the year for the best ornithological flip-flop of the year. So there was always the rule within birding circles in southern Africa: chats flick their wings, wheat ears wag their tails. And then we had mountain chat became mountain wheat ear, and that created a problem because it actually flicks its wings like a chat. So you kind of have to go, well, this is the rule, but just remember mountain wheat ear. Well, mountain wheat ear is going back to mountain chat. So obviously people have had a look at this and decided it's actually a chat, not a wheat ear, which actually makes sense.
yeah.
And then finally we have a split coming, which for those, I haven't ventured further north, but for those that have been into our neighboring countries and have seen rock martin up there, we're getting an interesting split. Rock martin is being split. The main species will remain rock martin, but we're going to get a red-throated martin, which is a split from that species complex.
Yeah.
So for some people who have fortunately been further north, that'll be a nice armchair tick.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's amazing how it does. I'm wondering what the next episode's going to bring us. How many more names will we have?
Yeah.
It seems to be has to be a common subject that we need to cover every episode from going forward.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's the news for this episode. But now let's take a look at Zaagkuilsdrift Lodge, which is the whole reason why we're here. And let's have a chat to Alex and Farah and see what their exciting new plans are for this amazing destination. So I have to say, Zaagkuilsdrift has always been one of the most iconic birding places in wider Gauteng. Phenomenal place. I mean, the bird life here is astounding. And of course, here this evening at Zaagkuilsdrift Lodge, got fiery neck nightjar calling in the background, and I mean the ambience sitting in the biomes here with this fire is amazing. But of course, why we're here is to talk to Alex and Farah, who've taken over the lodge here. And you know, there's always a sense of trepidation with birders when a much loved accommodation venue is taken over by new owners. You know, you don't know what their aspirations and aims are with the venue. We have had a chance to bump into and chat to Alex a bit, and I find it very refreshing and fascinating what his vision is, and above all his passion. So yeah, tomorrow is going to be interesting. We'll get to chat to Alex and find out a bit more about what he's been through and how he's ended up owning this iconic place that most birders are really waiting to see what direction it takes. And so far, from what I've seen, I think the direction's going to be good. But yeah, just enjoying this amazing ambience in this incredible place. And we'll see what the conversation with Alex tomorrow holds. Awesome sunrise this morning here at the lodge. Obviously this is why we birders get up early and come out to these places. Beautiful atmosphere. But after last night, really keen to have a chat to Alex and Farah and unpack what their plans are for the lodge. I think they've got some great things in the pipeline, but let's hear from them what their plans are. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good morning, and it'll be great to get some insights into what they're up to. Morning, Farah. How are you doing?
Good morning, Doug. I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, I've been chatting to you over the past couple of weeks leading up to us visiting here, and obviously, Alex is very passionate about what he does, but obviously, all our dreams and passions come at a price. I mean, he's had to make quite a bunch of sacrifices to end up where he is now.
Yes. He comes from a farming family in Maltino, and it was expected of him to kind of carry on with the farming. He loves farming, and that was something that he was looking forward to carrying on with, but his first love was birds. And when this opportunity came up, it was a big, it wasn't an easy decision to make. We really had to think about it, and yeah, it was a lot of sacrifice, but a very, very awesome opportunity, and we feel extremely blessed to be here.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I thought I was obsessed and passionate about birds, but his passion's very self-evident. I mean, how has he always been this crazy about birds?
Doug, he's mad about birds. He told me a story of when he was a kid that he went through to Sun City. I think he must have been about 6 years old, and he saw a golden pheasant for the first time, and he said it made him so excited about birds, and that's kind of where it started from him, and it was downhill from there. Alex has every single bird book you can imagine, anything bird related, shows, he's obsessed. He's obsessed with birds.
Yeah.
He loves them.
Yeah, no, and I mean, yeah, you can see it in everything he does.
Yeah.
No, he's really an inspirational person, I have to be honest.
No, he really is.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic catch.
No, he is. Yeah, so I must be honest, I think every single birder in the world, not only the country, must be envious of you living in this absolutely amazing place.
Yeah, it's to say it's a privilege is an understatement. I mean, I've come to really know what Zaagkuilsdrift's about, and it's just been an incredible experience since we got here. I love the sort of unknown every day. You know, when you wake up, you don't know what you're going to see. I mean, it's a famous area, and for good reason. The birding here is just unlike any other place in the country. It's unbelievable.
And I mean, you were saying you don't know what you're going to get every day. I mean, let's take seasons. I mean, where we're standing right now, we probably should be knee deep in water if this was summer.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the different biomes just on this property, the different birds that come in, the different seasons. It's absolutely crazy. We've only been here for a short while, but it's blown me away.
Yeah, and I mean, this amazing floodplain. I personally, I mean, how do you feel it compares to Nailsflay?
I don't really know Nailsflay, Doug.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been there myself, but you know, the specials people go to Nailsflay for your striped and spotted craiks
And
all of those sorts of things. I mean, you guys have all those specials here anyway.
yeah, I mean, just in the last few weeks, corn crake, striped crake, African crake we're seeing all the time here. Black crake, as you know, is very common. Billions, it's just been seen about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and all on this property. So it's pretty phenomenal. It's a pretty phenomenal place. The fluff tails that people are hearing, and we haven't spotted them myself yet, but they are around. So what's in here is an absolute gem. It's an absolute gem of a place. But I think, not just the flay, but everything on this property, this area, this sort of 25 kilometers stretch, and we are very fortunate to pretty much incorporate all of those habitats in this area. The flay itself, when it floods, drops again, floods, drops again. The birds that come in, part of the reason why we've created this opening for a hard experience is that people can actually see what's going on a greater level underneath the grass. This opening provides, especially when the flood comes in, the sort of food, the abundance of food that's hidden in this flay area that is so unique in so many different ways. The birds are, during the migration time, during the when the migrants come down, the reason they focus so much on this area is because of the varied abundance of food that you can get here. I don't know where else in the country you can see 430 plus species in such a short space of time and in such a short such a concentrated area. It has to be absolutely unique in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a birder coming out here, I can go to a Pafuri, I can do a Kruger weekend, and I'll get 180, 190 species. But I mean, that's a big area, and after one day, I'm still at about 160 species, which I can get here in a 25k stretch of road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the experienced birder like yourself can rack those numbers very easy, very comfortably. But you know, we put a lot of emphasis in the birding community on the experienced birder and what they can get and what they can see here. But I think there's an equal opportunity for the beginner birder to come here and see the bushveld species that we're so famous for year round. The sort of opportunities that you've got in such a small area to learn about birding is also what makes this place very, very special. So I think one of the messages to the up and coming birder, the young guy wanting to learn, or the person who's sort of just picked up a set of binoculars and is starting to take up birding or birding photography, come here and experience what this habitat and environment can offer. Come and see how the birds interact here. The opportunity to come across a whole lot of different species is immense. I don't think you've got a better place in the country to do it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And particularly, I mean, this hide here over the floodplain, I mean, you and I have been working together to kind of come up with a way of, we all know Crake Road is, unfortunately, becomes a parking lot in the wet season.
Yeah, it's sort of like a leopard in Kruger, you know, everyone flooding to the area, and you just see a picture of a striped crake and everyone goes mad. And the negative byproduct of that is the birds themselves, and I mean they are disturbed in the process. And I think this hide that you and I have collaborated on is a wonderful opportunity for people to come and see the birds interact in a natural way without being disturbed, without vehicles driving up and down. You get to see them behave or interact in a much more natural way. The photography over time is going to become much better. The birding experience is going to be much better. You're not going to have people in waders flushing up and down in the flay. It's a much more undisturbed environment, and that's what we need to go for as birders. We have a responsibility, and we need to start emphasizing that responsibility as the birding industry is growing in this country. We have a responsibility to start taking steps, especially on properties like these, to really emphasize and bring home responsible, ethical birding. So this is one of the steps amongst many other ideas that we've got here on the property and in the greater area to sort of promote that. Craik Road, one of the difficulties with the famous Craik Road is that if you fix Craik Road, you lose Craik Road.
Yes.
And so, you know, when it floods, one of the things for people to one of the things that people don't or moan about is coming across the road to try and get to the other side where the birding is so rich. How do you get across that? So the road needs to be fixed to do that. But once you do that, you'll lose that unique habitat that unique experience. So we are trying to create an experience here that's a lot less disturbed.
And I mean, it's really looking amazing already. But
thank you.
But you know, it's not. You talk about how many species you can get. I mean, how many kinds of bushveld are there just along the road aside from the floodplain?
Yeah. So, you know, if we look at this property, which, as I mentioned earlier, it sort of encapsulates what the Zaagkuilsdrift experience is about, leading into the Kgomo-Kgomo floodplain, is we've got different biomes. Now, this is traditionally the Springbok vlakte area, and that sort of comes through in the higher end of the property, where we've got your acacia thicket, your proper bushveld grass, savanna bushveld habitat, and that's sort of more in the lodge area, and where we're doing our feeding experiences, which we hope to really attract birds this coming season around the lodge area. So there's some nice exciting plans coming up with that. And then it flows down into the sort of camphor thicket, or the camphor bush. And that camphor bush is famously good for warblers, and that's one of the reasons we do so extremely well with warblers and bird watching here, is people flock all over to come and see some exclusive warbler species, and the LBJs, as you so brilliantly lined out in your book. So
Yeah.
you would know how valuable the camphor is in this area for that experience. And then the camphor thicket is cut off naturally, a straight line which is the beginning of the flay and the wetland. And as that floods, it sort of forms a natural barrier, and that also makes for some very interesting birding between these two distinctly different biomes. And then, that leads into the flay, and then after the flay, we start getting closer to the Pinaars Rivier, and that's where you get your sort of riverine thicket, riverine bushveld, where you get your taller trees, makes for very interesting night owling as well. So, it's just, I think it's a concentration of so many habitats in a narrow stretch, with an abundance of food, and that sort of creates this melting pot of just species coming from all over, literally all over the globe, coming from Europe all the way down here, and sort of just meeting. It's just an experience that cannot be replicated anywhere else.
Yeah. I think what I'd like to do, let's take a walk and we'll actually go and have a look. I want people to get a sense of what you've done with this Craik experience here on the floodplain.
Okay, great, let's go.
Yeah, so I must say, I mean, it's quite amazing sitting in this hide and then you're looking down this lovely piece of short grass to be able to see the Craiks.
Yeah, that was sort of the thing that struck me when we got here, and bearing in mind we've only been here for like 2 months, you know, it's been a lot to take in that space of time. But one of the things that stood out for me is, as beautiful and pristine as the wetland is, you don't get that experience of actually seeing what's going on at ground level. I mean, the grass is so thick and it's lush, it's beautiful, but you can't see these birds coming out. So
Yeah.
this was it was, you know, it's a tricky one. We have to be responsible at the same time. You don't want to go and cause permanent damage to the wetland. So our way of combating that is to cut it at the top. This is something that would have happened naturally, where herds of buffalo or whatnot would have come in and mowed the whole place down and moved on, and then the wetland recovers. We've also got an undergrazing problem actually because of that, and it's quite difficult. You know, there are a few strategies we have to think of. Everything we do here is about birding.
Yeah.
How do we create the best birding experience while conserving the habitat or keeping it as pristine as possible, and trying to find that balance? We're still figuring it out as we go, but so far this has been great. What we've uncovered in the short space of time after having opened this up is that the birds actually really like it. They're coming in, they're enjoying this sort of, they don't feel as threatened in the thick grass, so they interact a lot better in here, and they get a lot of food when the flood comes through. The small catfish and any other insects are being picked up in this opening, and it's made for an unbelievable birding experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, sitting in front of this hard, I can imagine when this is full of water, it must be absolutely amazing. No, yeah, I'm interested to see how this pans out in the coming summer.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great experience.
Yeah, I know for sure.
So when I first bumped into Alex, we were having a chat about how can the birding experience at Zaagkuilsdrift be improved. And obviously the first thing that sprung to mind was the krakes and the rest of the wetland birds. And we've been chatting about what we could do around the hard. And as a result, we eventually decided on a collaboration. And as part of announcing that collaboration, they've been gracious enough to let us put this Simply Birding sign up announcing our partnership. So yeah, it's been great having a chat and getting this experience going.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, Doug, from day one meeting you, to just us chatting and discussing different ideas and what we can do in the direction we can go. All of this is for the birds, for the better birding experience, and this sort of encapsulates that the signs of the beginning of a great friendship and a great partnership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, let's cut this ribbon and open the hard. Brilliant. There you go. And now it's the From the Field section of our show. When you're out in the field, we often see amazing sightings, amazing experiences. And we encourage you, if you've captured any of this, to share it with us, and we'd love to include your footage in the show. We've got some amazing stuff submitted to us today. But before we continue, the From the Field section for the remainder of this year is essentially sponsored by and brought to you by a company called Camelot. So we've given them naming rights to the From the Field section for the remainder of this year. They've been gracious enough to sponsor us with a fair amount of gear for the making of the show. So yes, for the rest of this year, you're going to hear that this section is brought to you by them. But anyway, on to what we've seen. I mean, you've got some amazing news to share.
Yeah, I was really blown away. A few weeks ago, I was trolling through all my Facebook sites, getting information. It was one of the Kruger sites. There was this incredible sighting of a martial eagle that had a young impala on the ground in the middle of the road. And it was an incredible sighting by Duncan Brown, and really kudos for what an incredible shot that you did get there. But what really struck me was how many people were convinced that this impala had actually been struck by a car. And they didn't believe that a martial eagle could take something down this big. And yeah, he struggled with it. Yes. And I think he eventually, but it was clear at the beginning of the video that impala was not dead. It hadn't been struck by a car. It had been taken by that marshal. And it just shows you just the sheer force of that impact must have been coming with that marshal coming in to grab it.
Yeah, and I mean, what a lot of people don't know is how the martial eagle actually takes its prey. So the inside of the claws of a raptor, particularly the large raptors, they razor sharp. And what the martial eagle does, they basically land on the back of the neck. The weight of the bird causes the talons to close, and effectively those talons just sever the spinal column. And that's effectively how they try and kill them as quickly and as painlessly as possible. And I mean, it's quite amazing to see that a bird, just with its feet, can take out something like an impala.
Yeah, but that was a big impala. I think maybe that day his eyes were a little bit bigger than his stomach.
Yes.
But it was incredible, and well done, Duncan, for that footage. Thank you for sharing it with us.
And talking of eyes bigger than the stomach, there was a bunch of birds. Renee Hubert was out birding, and she got this amazing footage of a group of birds mobbing and attacking a green mamba. And they persisted until they eventually managed to actually kill this green mamba. And then eventually one of the birds dropped down and actually started eating this green mamba. So quite amazing to see. You know, we all fear snakes, and yes, they are incredible predators with their venom, but it's not always the snake that gets the upper hand.
Yeah, well, they're number one enemy in a lot of birds' lives. I would also want to take him out.
Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, that's it, and thanks to both Duncan and Renee for sharing your sightings. But back to one of the core reasons why we do this show. It's not just about the birding, it's not just about the fun, it's also about highlighting conservation issues and what we can do for birds, but more importantly, what really important and influential people are doing for the birds we love to see. And recently, Shannon went out and she interviewed Anton van Niekerk about the amazing work him and some of his colleagues are doing in fighting to save the African grass owl. So let's have a listen at what Anton is busy doing.
In the heart of southern Africa, where the sun meets the land in a dance of light and shadow, a sanctuary of tranquility unfolds. The grasslands, a haven of life, balance and peace. Here, the rhythm of life beats in sync with the pulse of the earth, a delicate equilibrium maintained over millennia. This is the home of the endangered African grass owl. But alas, in our quest for progress, we've become blind to the delicate balance that exists in this fragile landscape. Our need for food, due to our ever-growing population, is threatening this very biome. This puts at risk of extinction not only the African grass owl, but the entire grass-veld biome in many parts of southern Africa. The symphony of life disrupted by the cacophony of our own making. The grasslands, once a sanctuary, now bear the burden of our relentless pursuit. Our relentless march, fueled by our neglect, threatens to erase the very tapestry that sustains life, including the refuge of the African grass owl. Amongst this destruction, one person fighting for the African grass owl is Anton van Niekerk.
In our previous episode, we discussed one of the greatest threats to our grasslands, the pom-pom weed. In this episode, we're going to explore what we will lose if we don't act now. This fight can only be won by the very thing that threatens it the most, people. And one of these amazing people who fights this fight for the African grass owl is Anton van Niekerk. Anton, why is it that the African grass owl is in such peril when so many other grassland species are seeming to adapt to this changing habitat?
Hi Shannon, thanks very much for having me on the show. One of the problems that we have with the African grass owl is it's what we call a niche habitat specialist. So you get a lot of animals that will adapt to a habitat, and then you get some animals that need a little bit more specific items in a habitat, and then you've got animals that need a very niche habitat. And that's the problem with the grass owl. It doesn't just need a wetland. It doesn't just need a grassland. It needs a very specific kind of wetland, what we call a valley bottom wetland. And then it needs a very specific type of grasses within that wetland. So you need a wetland which is very shallow. It can't be too oblique or too pitched or too sharp on the sides, otherwise the water runs off too much. And if it's too shallow, then it can remain too moist. So it needs to drain just the right amount, but it needs to be shallow enough that it hasn't drained even more. Then you add on top of that, you need very specific grasses within that wetland. So you need Imperata cylindrica, you need Thermida triandra, you need certain sedges for them to be able to utilize in order to roost there. So now say we've got that perfect mix. I've got my perfect wetland, I've got my perfect grasses, but then I've got some tall trees within it. They're not going to utilize it.
Wow.
If it's too close to the road, if it's too close to habitation, if it's too close to certain environments. So there's a whole criteria that are needed for this grass owl. So in order for it to exist, you've got so many factors that have to be in play that it reduces those aspects. So here I've got a wetland, there I've got specific grasses, now I've got trees, now I've got habitation.
That's incredible.
And then on top of that, we've got the threats, which are now we've got human encroachment, we've got agriculture, we've got all these things that take away from it, and that reduces our probabilities down and down and down.
Of course, pom-pom weed.
Pom-pom weed in every single one of our sites is becoming a greater and greater encroachment. And because it's not so well managed, then on top of that, you've got tall verbena. So we've got two types of weeds that are actually making it more and more difficult for the owls to actually utilize the ground. So very few birds can do what we call a vertical takeoff, and very few can do a vertical landing. And with the pom-pom weeds, with the very tall, dried out sticks, it can actually perforate the wings if they come in at the wrong angle. And so it damages the wing structure, and so they're not going to utilize that. So it is...
That's quite horrifying, actually.
Pom-poms becoming very problematic at certain sites. And we're seeing a reduction of viable habitation within those grasslands due to pom-pom.
Sure, and you talk about this being a niche species. I mean, they're obviously pretty Pacific. How Pacific are they with their prey?
They also, so a funny thing is that in the same habitats that we're finding the grass owls, we're finding the marsh owl. The marsh owl, strangely enough, will utilize a weed to actually have its nest underneath. So it adapts to actually weed encroachment in a positive way for nesting and roosting. The marsh owl is more varied in its diet. So they'll be sharing the same habitat, but the marsh owl will be taking birds. It's going to be taking very small mice. It'll be taking even bats on the wing. The termite ellets, when they do erupt, it's going to be feeding on those. Whereas the grass owl will utilize mainly in its diet Angoni flay rats. Then it'll go on to striped field mouse and a multi-mammoth mouse. And that's the thing, it'll occasionally adapt to taking a bird here and there, but it's not a large portion of its diet. And they will take beetles. Marsh owls will eat in their the pellets that they basically vomit out. You'll find a lot more beetles in the marsh owl than in the grass owl. So the marsh owl is much more adaptable, more varied in its diet, whereas the grass owl is more prey specific in its diet. Yeah.
And I believe rainfall's got quite a lot to do with the breeding. How is this?
So the rainfall influences breeding greatly for two reasons. So the grass owl creates, it needs very tall, so the grasses ideally are about 1 meter tall at least, and it needs a density of the grasses because it creates a tunnel system. Being a ground nesting bird, it needs to have cover from aerial predators actually seeing the nest site. So it has to be dense enough to fully cover the actual nest itself. If the rain hasn't been adequate, the grasses won't be tall enough and they won't be thick enough. So we need tall enough, thick enough grass for the actual nest site itself and to make the tunnels through it. And then the prey base is heavily dependent on healthy, thick grasses. So the Angoni flayrate is a plant-eating rodent, and so that's what it's dependent upon. If the grasses aren't thick enough and tall enough, they're not going to breed adequately in order to have the numbers sufficient for the owls to feed upon. So this is something, why do prey species breed at a certain time? Specifically, it's usually dependent upon prey. So if you have an eruption of prey, which we've had post-droughts and thick rains, they're going to breed very well. Yeah. But if you've got the dry times, you don't have the prey abundance, the numbers will be less as well.
And global climate change, are you starting to see any great changes and shifts in how this breeding is working?
100%. So there's two things that have been affected by the changes in the weather systems. One of the changes has been the times when the rains come in. We had traditionally our breeding season starts at February, that they start to pair up and we start to see the beginnings of tunnels. From about March to April is our peak breeding period, and that's when they actually have the nest, they have the eggs, and they have the chicks, etc. With the early rains, we started our surveys in early January, end of January, early February, and we found that the nest had already been abandoned because they'd already fledged. So we then had to, the following year, move it much earlier, and we started our survey already at the end of November. And by then we were finding nest sites with eggs already. So that was already a 3 to 4 month advance on their breeding cycle. That's how it also shows how rapidly they'll adapt. So they'll adapt very readily. The problem that we had is that the rains came in such abundance so early that some of the chicks drowned. The chick is so small, and it's in a wetland, and the wetland had actually saturated so quickly and so rapidly that some of the chicks drowned. So this adaptation is also tricky to them. So it meant that they lost some of the chicks, and they had to then offset once the wetlands had actually gone down by 3 months again before they tried for another brood. So we as researchers, we learn as we go. Every cycle changes. We're in an incredibly dry cycle at the moment, and so they've actually pushed out greatly. The wetlands are dry in this
they
specific
said
area.
that February is one of the driest months they've ever recorded for Gauteng.
100%. The wetlands, we do survey data, and the wetland data previously was that they were very wet, and in the season they're dry. And we have concern about the breeding for the season.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, obviously, this is a birding show, and everybody wants to know where they can find an African grass owl. What sort of habitat should they be looking at? And how easy are they to actually identify? I believe they look a lot like the barn owls.
So a very nice thing is a lot of people will give us a report because they're aware of our grass owl studies, and they'll say, oh, I saw a grass owl here, or I saw a grass owl there. And as soon as I hear a grass owl, what time of the day was it? No, it was late afternoon, and I could see it going over the grasslands. And I'm instantly, if you see it and it's hunting in the early morning or late afternoon, 99.9% of the time it's a marsh owl. People battle to differentiate the difference because they see it in grasslands. It's a grass owl. I mean, grass owl. And you should almost change the words around. If it's visible and it's hunting and it's in the open, 99.9% of the time it's going to be a marsh owl. Very rounded head and dark eyes, and the feet don't extend beyond the tail. That's an easy kind of definer. Very prominent banding on the wings. Okay. But the grass owl is strictly nocturnal. Only once it's dark is it going to pop out and begin with this hunting process. So if you see it actively, freely, without a flash, 99% of the time it's a marsh owl. And the only way you can actually find the grass owls is to actively go into the grasslands.
And flash them. But I mean, how controversial is that? I mean, should we be doing flashes when we don't have the experience in what we're doing?
The reason I dissuade people from doing a flash, specifically in the breeding season can be anywhere from November up until August. So November to August, ideally don't be going and flushing the owls, which leaves you with only 3 or 4 months of safe, viable flushing, not to destroy a nest site. So the tunnel systems we've recorded up to over 2 meters long. So say you see the owl pop up over here and you go and you walk towards it, you can step on the eggs, on the baby chicks, destroy the tunnel, expose the tunnel. So we dissuade people going without a grass owl specialist. We've developed protocols. We work with the Endangered Wildlife Trust. They had a very, very successful and very good grass owl project, and they taught us what to look for, what the best practices are, regularity of surveys, how to not walk in on the same line, because then predators will follow your scent trail and they'll go to the nest. So there's a lot of protocols that you don't want to lead predators to the site. A problem that we're having is we're getting an abundance of pied crows in the area, and when the owls flush, we've photographed them being physically attacked by the crows, and we've lost some sites to predation from aerial predators, etc.
Oh, that's quite shocking. You say you get support from the Wildlife Trust. What support do you get from government?
So EWT merely supports us with expertise. So no financial or any other incentives are given, but the expertise is invaluable, and you need something. So what people need to understand is a threatened species. You need a permit to actually study. So the grass owl is listed as vulnerable, and you need what they call a TOPS permit, Threatened or Protected Species Permit, to actually survey them. And we work with the Endangered Wildlife Trust with their Threatened or Protected Species Permit. So you can't just go and do as you wish with a threatened species. Yeah. And anytime you impact on the bird, especially on nest sites, you actually need a permit to do that. So that's something that people need to bear in mind. As far as government or any other kind of support or funding goes, we haven't got any. Number one, we haven't applied. And number two, it would be quite a rigorous process to go through. The criteria are very specific.
So this is truly just a love for you?
This is just a passion project. So this is completely volunteer-based, and we rely on funding from the community to our... We do this in the Gecko Conservancy, Greater Kgomo Conservancy, and then people fund through Gecko through their
private funding.
Private funding, 100%.
That's incredible. It's amazing what you do here. But what sort of hope do we actually have for the African grass owl in Gauteng, in this region?
So one of the most threatened ecosystems that we have are grasslands. Grasslands as open as this and as big as this are becoming more and more rare. One reason being we're in the Anthropocene era, which is the era most impacted by humans. What we've done as humans is we plow billions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. Plants need and love carbon, and so we're getting a lot of very strong growth of bushes. So we get what's called bush encroachment, as any reserve would know. Bush encroachment forces out the grasslands and depletes grasslands. We've got obviously the weeds coming like pom-pom that are pushing out grasslands. And then grasslands are the most transformed habitat in terms of agriculture. And you've got one of the other more threatened types of environment being wetlands. So wetlands and grasslands are fantastic for agriculture. So we're losing our habitat to development. So we're seeing better regulations in this regard. You may not clear more than a hectare without a permit. You may not do this without a permit. You may not do that without a permit. So
they are becoming stricter.
They're becoming stricter, it's becoming better managed, and we've got great partnerships with GDOD, Gauteng Department of Agriculture, Rural Development and Environment, in helping us to protect these biomes and helping us to protect it. Hope lies in the way that civil society partners with government to have good positive outcomes.
Yeah, it boils down to education.
Education and awareness are key, 100%. Yeah.
I can't believe what you're doing. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I really wish you the very best in your endeavors, and I'd love to follow you more closely, and maybe in a future episode have a chat with you and see where you are. Maybe we can bring you out to the CRR and come and introduce us to our grass owls.
We'd love to see it. You've got ideal habitat literally when you drive through the CRR, which is a beautiful, pristine environment. We can still see there's very, very ideal habitat for grass owls, so it would be nice to do a follow-up with the successes of finding viable nesting sites in the CRR.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
These last 2 episodes that we've in these interviews I've done has been incredibly sobering for me. I realize that the problem with our grasslands is rather overwhelming, and it doesn't just take some incredible individuals like Anton from Gecko and Franca from the Crocodile River Reserve to do this. It's not only their war. It's all of us. It's a war we all have to fight. And if we don't start taking action now, we have a lot to lose. And I know times are tough, and donating money is not necessarily an ability for half of us. I mean, if you're able to do that and sponsor the Crocodile River Reserve or Anton's Gecko in helping him fight the African grass owl, that's great. But maybe some of you actually don't have money, but you've got time. Get involved with an organization that is actively fighting this and see if there's a way you can get involved. And yeah, a lot of us don't have any time. It's difficult. But there's one thing you do have, and that's your voice. And the proverbial saying that if you plant a seed, it will grow. And amazingly in nature, you can plant that seed in some of the most barren places, and it will sprout and blossom. Plant a seed in some of the most barren mines, and you create wonderment. We all know what it's like to discover something new about nature. It's wonderful. Create that wonderment. That seed will blossom, and people will step up and start to make those changes. They won't kill that snake. They will find a way to relocate it. Stand up with your voice and start spreading the word. We need to all do something. We need to save the wildlife of this country and the grasslands from the pom-pom weed, all the invasives that are causing huge problems in wildlife. We need to make a change. I hope in some way I've planted a seed and that you can take it forth from here and we can all make a difference. Thank you.
Welcome to the controversial part of our show. What we try and do every episode is highlight something contentious to make you think not only about how you bird, but how you responsibly and ethically bird. And Shannon's just been speaking to Anton about grass owls and how they go about surveying them. And we all want to see grass owls. And I think the biggest thing that worries me is people who don't understand the impact on these owls going to flush them.
No, it's quite shocking. I think, going back to our previous episode, we got a lot of people out there and all they're interested in is ticking. They want that bird. They don't really look at the bigger environment and the impact they have on when they go into that environment. And I think the African grass owl is a classic example on why you should be careful and conscious, more than anything, on what you're actually doing. Because if you're going into this environment, they breed in tunnels. And you might be thinking, oh, great, I'm going to flush a grass owl and I'll just walk through this field. But you could be walking through that tunnel system, trampling their eggs, killing their babies. And I think this is something that must be left to the professionals, the people that are actively in conservation of them. And I think, guys, you've got to think before you take that step. And
I think part of the problem is, the age-old adage that a little knowledge is dangerous. And I think you get a lot of people who badge themselves as senior experienced birders, and they are. They've seen a lot of stuff, they know a lot of birds. But do they know that there's only 2 months of the year where you can flush grass owl? And would a bird guide who, let's be honest, is out there to book clients, etc., would they know and be prepared to say, for 10 months, I'm going to tell the people I'm taking birding, no, I can't show you a grass owl because it's not the right time of year. And it's not only, guides, for example, it's just birders as a whole, I have seen littered over the year, and not just in the safe 2 months. I've seen people showing pictures of grass owl during the day, and genuine grass owls. The only way they got those pictures during the day is flushing. So I'm deeply concerned that there's a whole bunch of people running around there that don't understand the implications of their actions.
I think it also at the bottom line boils down to a little bit of greed. You know, at the end of the day, I get paid to do this. Someone's demanding that I get it, so I'm going to do it. And they're not looking at the bigger picture, and it's sad. And I think across the board in conservation, I see this all the time. You know, conservation is definitely not about, you know, making money. It's about hard work and putting yourself and everything you have back into making sure that these animals actually have a chance.
Yeah.
And it's just sad.
Yeah, I mean, in all the work I did with Anton beforehand, before you did your interview, he was at great pains to stress that any footage that was shared must not have any buildings that would make the site identifiable. And I mean, the scary thing he said to me, there were certain groups of people, I mean, I don't want to malign anyone, I'm not going to mention who he said, sorry, I'm not bringing you to the site, because they're people that will drop 4-figure sums of money to go, I want to see a grass owl, and I'll pay you big money to do it. And he's going, if I don't trust that you're going to behave ethically, I'm not even going to tell you where the site is. So I really think conservation in many respects has become a balancing act between those that conserve the birds and those that want to see them. And I think unfortunately the two are often at odds with each other.
I agree. It's actually really shocking, and it's sad that this is actually happening. And I'm grateful that we can sit here and actually point it out, because I think some people are just not conscious enough to actually
No, exactly. So yeah. Anyway, that's it for our show. Shannon's got some exciting news to share with you about what's going to be in our upcoming episode.
Yeah, so next 2 episodes are really quite exciting. We're going to be covering the amazing trip Doug had to Lesotho, and we'll be seeing some amazing footage from it, and what you're missing if you're not booking yourself onto one of these incredible trips.
Just before we end the show, we actually have an exciting competition to announce. So you'll see on the screen, and some of you that have birded with us will know our mascot Hedgebert. He is hiding somewhere in every single episode. So how does the competition work? Well, first off, you can win a pair of Nikon Monarch binoculars valued at around 5,000 Rand. So that's a lovely prize, but obviously we're not just going to give it away. You have to do something. In every episode, up till the end of the year, there will be Hedgebert hidden somewhere, and he won't be easy to see. And obviously you can't for this episode go, he was on screen while we were talking about the competition. He is somewhere else in this episode, and we're not going to give you any hints. At the end of the year, you have to then send in an email to say in each episode, where was Hedgebert? You give the episode and roughly the time in that episode where he was, and all the people that got the most correct answers will go into a draw for this amazing pair of Nikon Monarch binoculars. And obviously this is designed, we would like you to watch our show, watch it a lot and interact with it. So, you know, to make him hard to find and make you earn the prize, that's what you have to do. But yes, you stand a chance of winning these amazing, amazing binoculars.
Exciting.
So that's it. Thanks for watching the show. Again, as always, like with all these YouTube things, we ask you, please subscribe, please share our video, like our video, comment on it, and we'll see you on the next episode.